more commander-centric a deck is, the more vulnerable your strategy becomes. Take Vivi, the new poster boy of always being a broken storm deck no matter how casual you try to build him. Here's mine. A Vivi deck will generally have some cheap spells to trigger Vivi to make a ton of mana, then a great payoff to end the game like Dragonstorm, while the rest of the deck is dedicated to protecting Vivi because the deck is so reliant on Vivi sticking around. This leads to the classic protect the king, or mage in this example, gameplay that is often unfun as the pilot's forced to play setup and find a window and end the game abruptly, while everyone else is pressured to throw everything they have to stop that player at any moment in time. But what if there's an answer to this problem? Where you can take your proactive, unfun, do nothing but set up and win deck and smooth it all out, where the deck is not only more playable, but the whole game is just more enjoyable for the table. And this is why you should midrangeify your commander deck. Trademarked TM. I just did it. It's over. It's mine. Midrange decks are defined by their ability to flex between an aggressive role against control, a controlling role against aggro, and a value attrition game in the mirror. And every card plays multiple roles. Take one of my favorites, Bloodtithe Harvester, aggressive beater, removal, and it leaves behind an artifact to smooth out your draws. Or Graveyard Trespasser, a strong attacker, graveyard hate, life gain against the aggro decks, an award trigger that makes it trade up on value. Shieldred punishes draws, closes games, pads life, and blocks well. You get the idea. To midrangeify your deck is to shift your deck from going all in on doing the thing or just committing to one role, to playing more permanents and spells that allow you to threaten the table in multiple ways. It's about adding pivot game plans that we can flex to. Let's take an example from Standard, the Omniscience deck. Too soon? The blue-white Omni deck didn't just win with a combo, it threatened you with a huge flyer like Morang River Regent, who also helps with the main game plan by filtering cards and also discarding Omniscience. The deck didn't have to win right away because a lot of cards just played double duty. And we're going to take this approach to midrangeify our Vivi spells deck to also be able to pivot to being a Dragons deck. If we think back on our game plan video, link here if you haven't watched it yet, we have some general end states we design our decks to achieve. Most decks that don't have a strong mid-range plan usually focus on one or two very specific outcomes. Like for my Vivi deck, it involves resolving a Dragonstorm that grabs Terror of the Peaks, Twin Flame Dragon, Lathless, and Deceptive Frostkite to copy Terror of the Peaks to deal a lot of damage. So let's draw a line of how we get there. We have setup, support, and payoff. We set up with Vivi, support the game plan through casting spells to power up Vivi to get mana, and pay off by casting Dragonstorm. The first step of how to midrangeify your deck is adding a pivot to synergize with your win condition. Ours is quite easy. Since Dragonstorm finds dragons, all that means is we play more dragon cards in the mid game, so we're not completely dependent on casting cantrips and one-use spells to trigger Vivi and win off a Dragonstorm. So working backwards, we want to add cards to our deck in the support section of the core game plan that synergizes with our win con, but also be flexible enough to stand on their own, just like that Morang River Regent or Bloodtithe Harvester. We know there are classic buckets of cards in Commander that makes a deck run well: ramp, draw, removal, and your synergy cards to actually do the thing. The easiest way to give your deck a pivot and midrangeify it is we find permanents that do more than one thing. We can find card draws stable to a body, like Imrith, Desert Doom, who draws cards on damage, but is also a strong flying threat. We can play value-based removal, like Sword Coast Serpent, who can bounce a creature for 2, but then come back later as a 7-mana 6/6 that's sometimes unblockable. These cards let you develop a board without giving up key cards in roles from a classic Commander template, while still driving towards a designed endgame of our choice. But the question is, how many of these flexible cards should we actually play? I like to deck build using cube-style packages, and if you've been following our Commander template series, you know we break our decks down into card type categories to find better starting numbers. But if you want to midrangeify your list, here's how to start. Organize your current deck into our core categories: ramp, draw, removal, synergy, payoffs. And once you've done that, go through each category and try to convert half the package into our mid-range flexible cards. And here's what it looks like in my Vivi deck. I cut spells like Ponder, Faithless Looting, Preordain, Artist's Talent, and Frantic Search, all of which help me dig for the right card, but don't give me more material to play with. I replaced them with cards like Kindred Discovery, Frostcliff Siege, and Imrith as I mentioned earlier, because they're cards that stick around and draw more than once. Check out the draw video here to learn more about the difference. For some of my mana cards, I cut temporary mana like Rite of Flame and Mana Vault, which is pseudo-temporary, I know you can untap it, and added Urza's Incubator, Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind, and Galazeth Prismari. I also slightly increased my land count. Doing all of this lets me scale mana over time instead of relying on burst turns. We also have a whole video on this if you want to dive deeper into sustainable ramp versus temporary spikes. Midrangeifying your deck gives your deck a pivot where you don't have to create field bats for yourself and the table with overly commander-reliant decks, and give yourself more game to play by having better and more flexible threats. Thanks for watching. You watching those Rebel videos again? Yeah, you'd like this one. They're talking about how to midrangeify your commander. Huh. Interesting. Did they talk about what midrange actually looks like in multiplayer? It's like more philosophical. Wait, hold on. Philosophical? Kid, it's midrange. It's pretty cut and dry. You just grind down the table, and the only thing that's remotely difficult is how to beat 3 opponents rather than 1. Sounds like they don't know what they're talking about. You know, if you're so passionate about midrange, why don't you make a video? Maybe I'll make a video on how to build a real midrange commander deck. Your break's over, by the way.